Good evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast. Your one-stop shop for pro wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. Today is Mailbag Monday, where we answer your questions that you have submitted via Instagram. And you guys have certainly submitted quite a few good ones today. So it's going to be an exciting episode for certain. So joining me to discuss these questions, firstly, the head of reviewing here at Wrestling Republic, Coby Galenzoski. How are you, Coby?
Seems to be the one thing that I have forgotten to do and haven't been given the chance to do lately. I gotta plug something I created. Today is Mailbag Monday, my idea. Okay, good. We're here. Move on. Introduce the other guest. Let's get this over with.
At least you haven't done Clark's gimmick of stealing who I'm about to introduce. Our second guest today, it'll be his last appearance for a week as he's going on holiday. And that man is David Sheldon. How are you, David?
Hello, everybody. Yes, this is my last show before we go away on holiday. Excuse the different setup for the day. My computer decided it wanted to crash 5 minutes before the start of the show. So we've had to do a very, very temporary last-minute setup to plug my phone in. So I'm working through the phone. So apologies if there are any sound issues or any technical issues. But we're trying to make this work last minute. So yeah, very excited to get into Mailbag Monday, and let's get at it.
Oh, that's what it's like. This is live broadcasting, everyone. Technology always goes wrong. Always. Does not fail to go wrong. It's the only thing about it that doesn't fail. But let's move on to the first question. And this question was submitted by Melissa, who is asking, if you could trade one WWE star to AEW and one AEW star to WWE, who would it be? And this is a very, very good question, and a question which I have actually been thinking about for a long time now. Well, more specifically, I've been thinking about whether or not this could actually ever happen, right? Because we've seen it in tons and tons of other sports, right? We see it in, football here in the UK. You see it in football in America. You see it in tons and tons of different sports. You even saw it, with UFC swapping with, and I've completely forgotten, Clark won't be happy, but I've completely forgotten the name of it now. I cannot even think about it, but they swapped Ben Askren for, and I've forgotten their name too. See, my MMA knowledge is awful, guys. This is why, we need Clark here, but no, they did it a couple of years ago where UFC swapped the fight out with somebody internationally. And yes, could we now see the same happening in professional wrestling? Could we see somebody going from WWE to AEW in return for an AEW star going to WWE? And the honest answer is, I think it's a possibility in the long run. I really do. We've never, ever seen it in professional wrestling before, at least to my knowledge we haven't. But could we see it? I think it's possible. And Coby just told me that, it was Demetrius Johnson who was swapped for Ben Askren a few years back. And of course, that deal did not end up working out well for UFC, but worked out very well for one championship. But if a WWE star was to move to AEW, I think that star should be AJ Styles. Recently in WWE, he's not really done much. But him going to AEW and being, reunited with some of his old friends, I think that could be super interesting. And it's a nice way to end his career, As for who WWE would get in return, well, I think MJF, AEW's biggest star, right? AJ Styles heading to AEW, that would be huge, huge for AEW. He'd be a big, big draw for them, right? But MJF going to WWE, well, that would be huge for WWE in the long run. Yes, AJ Styles is way more of a draw than MJF is currently, but in the long run, that could change. MJF's very young. He's got so much potential, and we know WWE want him. We know it. We also know that he's got at least a level of interest in going to WWE. So, yeah, I think AJ Styles to AEW and MJF to WWE would actually be a fair swap, all things considered. But what about you, Coby? Who would you trade between WWE and AEW?
I mean, the name I gotta say off as a joke, Austin Theory to AEW, because character work and in-ring promo ability doesn't matter at that point. I had to throw that dig in. I don't have a good WWE name, but it's something that comes up a lot of time when we talk about this guy. So every time we're talking behind the scenes about this name, and this name is Apollo Crews. Clark continues to mention how athletic and how truly gifted he is in the ring, and I think while WWE is like the opposite, you need a character to get over. You need promo ability. You need that total package type deal, and Apollo doesn't necessarily have it. Could it benefit Apollo Crews being in AEW? Possibly. But I mean, there's a lot of names out. Like, I mean, AJ Styles is a given. If he wanted to go, he could. But I think he is almost in the position of where he's fine where he's is right now. He's working a slower style because he's older than he should be, but he's older than he was 10 years ago when he was in New Japan and Ring of Honor. But the names I brought up for AEW, not named MJF, because we almost we can pretty much guarantee he's going to go there unless.
Oh wow!
I would say it's a guarantee he goes there. But the names that came to mind is, I mean, there were just to name a couple. Is we talked about Jay White's style fitting WWE more, and I almost think it still is a given. His style would be better there. And I mean, we talk about his style being that slow, methodical pace, just like we saw the Bloodline Civil War. And a lot of the criticisms, even on the daily podcast, was that the first half of the match was slow. Yes, I can see David waving. But, I mean, even then, like, we can compare it, but I think that's almost the benefit of what Jay White's style would have had if he did go to WWE. I mean, the other stars the same thing as Ricky Starks. His biggest strength is his ability to talk on the mic and get you interested in him and invested. And he doesn't get enough TV time to talk on the mic and get you invested. He is good in the ring, but his biggest strength or his biggest value is his ability to talk on the mic. And then the other name I just thought of, which is probably something no one would say, Roosh. He's a bigger, he has the bigger frame. He's pretty athletic, and we know how WWE want their international stars. They want a star they can put in that position as the top Mexican star or the top lucha star. They have Nakamura as their top Japanese representative.
Yeah,
I think Roosh could. I mean, Roosh in the WWE system could only do good for him, I think.
Yeah. No,
Is it a name I see? Maybe he goes there eventually because of his brother actually being in NXT. Maybe it's something he's thought about. But I mean, I don't see it. I wouldn't see it being something that wouldn't benefit Roosh. And I think WWE would get something out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to WWE when he was a free agent a few months ago. Well, quite a few months ago now before he ended up going to AEW. But David, if you could have one trade between WWE and AEW, and then AEW send a starting return to WWE, who would you choose?
First of all, I want to just dispute a point that you made, Ben. When you just very quickly, I entirely disagree that AJ Styles is a bigger draw than MJF. I think 5 years ago, yes. I think now AJ is doing nothing, and MJF is. I think if you put those two on a card, even to WWE fans, they'd want to watch an MJF match more because of the novelty of MJF.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I really do. I think we're undervaluing MJF's value there. Just very quickly, with regards to things, I think there are two options for this because I've kind of done this slightly differently. The who would I want to see with a completely clean canvas? I did AJ Styles to AEW and Swerve Strickland to WWE because I think Swerve is main event material and money. But I did something slightly differently. I picked two lower card guys doing nothing right now on either company that I think could do a good job in their respective companies that I think could happen. So to AEW from WWE, I would move Cedric Alexander. who is doing absolutely nothing right now. He's floundering with Sheldon Benjamin with a never-ending potential of a Hurt Business reunion that I don't think is ever going to come. I think Cedric Alexander, at the very least, would suit AEW style, particularly with stuff with ROH as well. He'd have a lot of chances to shine in, with regards in with your kind of more high-fly guys, your AR Foxes, your Action Andretti's, that he would suit very well into that division. To WWE, I've got a real red herring here. Bear with me. I've gone with Brian Pillman Jr. Another guy doing absolutely nothing and has done nothing with AEW. But I think the WWE would want Pillman because of his family name. But more than that, I think Brian Pillman Jr. beginning in NXT, particularly with your Drew Gulaks and your Charlie Dempsey's and your those guys, and building his way up, I think you could get some good value out of Pillman, because I think he's really, really good. And it frustrates me whenever I don't see him on television, because aside from some stuff with MJF, I remember almost nothing that he's done in his entire run. And he is talent, and there's some real potential there. So I think he would be somebody that WWE would want, like I said, because of his name, because of the stories they could tell there. And I think you could get some good value out of building Pillman into... He's not going to be a main event player. Neither is Cedric. But you can build them up to be solid mid-card hands, which is more than they're doing right now, which is a whole lot of nothing.
Fair enough. I'm gonna respond back to what you said about AJ Styles there. And I do agree, right? As like a hardcore wrestling fan, or even just somebody, a fairly casual wrestling fan, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe MJF's more exciting. I'd agree with that. I personally would prefer to see an MJF segment over an AJ Styles segment, right? At this moment in time. However, there's two ways of looking at this. One way is social media following. AJ Styles has 2 million more Instagram followers than MJF. And 600,000 more Twitter followers than MJF. However, again, sometimes social media can be, a misconception. Otherwise, Eva Marie would have been like the biggest draw in WWE, right? But then if we do look at, TV ratings too, SmackDown gets, about 2.5 times the amount of viewers Dynamite does per week. So I think it's next to impossible for more people to know MJF than AJ Styles at this time.
Yeah, but I think more people
get exposed to him.
Yeah, but more people probably know The Miz than they do Kenny Omega. Does that mean The Miz is a bigger draw than Kenny Omega is? More people.
I would agree with that. Personally.
More people know who Eva Marie is probably than Will Ospreay. Does that mean Eva Marie would sell more tickets than Will Ospreay would? I disagree.
I mean, selling tickets, it's another thing. I guess it is, another layer there in terms of, how many tickets can you sell? But in terms of bringing eyes to it, yeah, Eva Marie, if she announced herself going on to a wrestling show, that would probably get more attention to it than if Will Ospreay announced he was going. Let's say Will Ospreay announced he was going to an independent show, or Eva Marie announced she was going into an independent show. I think there'd be more coverage and more eyes on it of the Eva Marie going to announcing herself at that wrestling show than if Will Ospreay did. And that is,
but would that sell tickets? I think it has the opposite, because the Ospreay fan who are in that local area are going to say, "Oh, this is going to be must see because Ospreay delivers." Eva Marie's like, "Oh, do I really want a picture or an autograph with her? Is she going to upcharge me $200 or something?"
I just like to say I feel really bad that I brought it from AJ Styles to Eva Marie, because I love AJ. This is no dig at AJ at all. AJ's fun. I was just about to say AJ's phenomenal. That's sorry.
AJ Styles is the phenomenal one.
And he's great. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next question. And this is submitted by Soul, who is asking, if AEW were to collab with a UK promotion for All In, which one would it be and why? Truthfully, I don't think they should collab with an independent promotion, because, AEW, this is a big stadium event, right? This is, it's not necessarily mainstream, but it's the closest thing they've had to a mainstream event. This is going to be great for them. It's a big stadium show, and, people are learning about AEW. So I don't think they should spend any time, teaching people about another promotion when people are still learning about them. If they were to, team up with anybody, I'm going to say my favorite British promotion, and that would be Progress Wrestling. but I don't really know if they should. But what do you think, David?
I agree to this that like we should not have a significant presence from Progress or Rev Pro or Defy. All, by the way, I should point out all three of those companies are doing shows the night before All In.
That's true.
Progress have a joint show with Defy, and Rev Pro are running the Copper Box in a massive event. I believe that's the show which has Will Ospreay. Is it Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi or something like that on the show? Which is amazing. I think it would be nice for them to possibly to reference the companies, especially given the amount of work in relations. Like WWE reference Progress at Money in the Bank, and AEW are more known for a working relationship. If they used anywhere, I could see them used as a 0 hour kickoff kind of thing where you have people who are kind of known to both. Yeah. Guys, if I could see any, I'd like to see somebody like a Michael Oku or somebody on the 0 hour. Don't put them in featured matches. I think the only people of that thing will be people like Will Ospreay and possibly Zack Sabre Jr., both guys that do frequent Rev Pro and Progress shows, mainly Rev Pro. I don't see them working with either. I think they're probably more likely to work with a Rev Pro, strangely, and I don't know why, because Progress is probably a bigger company. But Rev Pro, I don't know if they were going to work with probably Rev Pro, but I don't think they will. But I'd like to see them referenced. I'd like to see if AEW can build more goodwill by, even for a small, for a mention on commentary, just give them a little bit of exposure, because it will really help them.
Absolutely, I do agree that they should reference them for sure, and maybe if they do, an all-in battle royale or something before the show, I'd love to see Michael Oku involved, because he's fantastic. But Coby, what do you think?
I mean, this is one of those shows where we're all not shows, but this is the question we all kind of agree with at the same point in time. This is what I wrote. The main question is there a company that is big that it actually matters? And this is no disrespect, because UK promotions were at their peak 6 years ago, maybe. That's the thing. Progress and Rev Pro are getting back there. Progress just had Ospreay back for Super Strong Style 16. Rev Pro, like you said, is getting a Ospreay and Shingo Takagi match. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of, I agree with Ben, is AEW is still brand new, and it's AEW is going to work with a Progress? It makes no sense. And that's, at the end of the day, it sucks to say it that way, but it makes no sense business-wise for AEW to say, oh yeah, we'll work with you. If anything, they do the same thing WWE did. They had at least a man like DeReese and Andy Roberts or Andy Wild as kind of security men. That's the most they're gonna do, is they'll give stars a payday, because that's what Tony likes to do. When he's in local areas, he gives the local talent a spot on, well, it was Dark and now it's like Ring of Honor or such like that. That's the other statement to say, is there's no United Kingdom wrestling stars that are worth bringing in, not named William Ospreay, or even the slightest if GYV got their release. Maybe I could see them getting a top spot, but even then, there's not big UK names there anymore. No, the AEW doesn't need to book Ricky Knight Jr. to sell any more tickets. It's no disrespect to Ricky Knight Jr., but
it's true. Yeah,
it's true. No UK stars are going to help sell tickets for AEW. They're getting a major pay-per-view, and that's the selling point.
That exactly. They're not in a position where they need to be, putting over other companies' stars. They're in a position where they need to be putting over their own stars, and that kind of just sums it up, right? We got Melissa in the comments. Hey to Melissa. Now let's move on to the next question, and this one is submitted by at School of Wrestling on Instagram, and they are asking who will win the G1 Climax this year. For those of you who don't know what the G1 Climax is, it is the yearly round-robin style tournament that New Japan Pro Wrestling do. This year, it's split into 4 different blocks, with the winners of each block facing each other in a knockout-style tournament. within a semi-final and a final. And my prediction, right, for this is actually quite an obvious one. I predict Kazuchika Okada is going to win the G1 for a third consecutive year. Yes, I've said it. Yes, I just predicted that. But I truly do think that will be the case. However, this is where I think they're going to mix it up a bit. In Sanada's block, right? And Sanada is currently the world champion in Japan. I believe that Sanada is going to lose to either Shota Umino or Ren Narita, right? And we know that Shota Umino and Ren Narita and Tsuji as well are all part of the new Three Musketeers in Japan. And the old, Three Musketeers was Tanahashi, Shibata, and Nakamura. That was a huge, huge deal, right? They were the faces of New Japan Pro Wrestling for years. The fact that they brought back that name for these three means that they've got big, big, big plans for them. And for that reason, I think that one of them is going to beat Sanada. I'm sorry, it's going to be either Shota or Ren Narita, because they're the ones in Sanada's block, so they're the only ones facing him. But I think one of them is going to beat Sanada, and then he's going to, in their title opportunity before Wrestle Kingdom, beat Sanada for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, meaning that we'll get either Shota Umino or Ren Narita versus Okada for the championship at Wrestle Kingdom, and the younger star will go over. So yes, that is, a bit of a hot take, a little bit random. But Coby, I'll pass it to you first. Who do you think will win this year's G1?
I mean, just to clear things up, is like you said, 4 blocks. The end game after all the matches happen is the first 2 names in each block are going to enter an 8-person tournament, not just the
So
just to clarify,
I got it mixed up with last year's.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly fine. Like they're changing it. They're changing it to a 20-minute time limit this year.
Yeah,
which is also interesting if you want to think of it that way. Like that's the thing. I mean, the G1's interesting. We're gonna see names like Kazuchika Okada, like Will Ospreay. You can assume Naito's going to be one of the top names. I don't think Tanahashi is, even though Tanahashi is in the G1 still. That A block is interesting because it has Kaito Kiyomiya, and Kaito Kiyomiya had the infamous shoot-like boot to Okada earlier on in the year, and then they had the match at the final KJ Muto event where Okada went over. I think they're going to run that back when they do the 8-person block or the 8-person tournament bracket, however you want to say it. But I think the winner is either going to be someone like Will Ospreay or Okada. I don't see anyone else like it. I think it's interesting to see how well Kaito Kiyomiya actually performs. It's also going to be how interesting Eddie Kingston performs as well. But I think it's a clear kind of direction. It's going to be one of the main few. I don't think Naito has a chance, but it could be like Okada, Ospreay, and maybe Sanada wins it. I don't think he'll be in the finals, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very interesting. And like you said, Kaito Okada is likely going to happen at some point in the tournament because they've been building it. But I don't think Kaito is going to go any further than that because he's not with New Japan. He's not a New Japan talent. And we got Bailey in the comments here saying he hopes Tsuji wins it as he really impressed him at Dominion, but he fears that they'll give it to Okada for the three-peat. And Shooter's been in very high-profile matches recently, so he's a good shout. I mean, yeah, I really do think that Okada is going to win it to, get the hat trick of G1 victories. But like I said, I think it's either going to be Ren Narita or Shooter who beat Sanada during the tournament, so they earn themselves a title opportunity and then take the title off Sanada before Wrestle Kingdom, right? So you still have one of the 3 Musketeers in the big Wrestle Kingdom main event and as champion going into it. But then, of course, you also have the big name in Okada who's there to draw fans in. But David, what about you? Who do you think will win the G1 this year?
I was asked this question a few weeks ago, I think on a Mailbag Monday, and I said Shingo Takagi. I don't know why I said Shingo Takagi. It's not going to be Shingo Takagi. I've changed my mind since then, although it is from the same stable. It's interesting that, Coby, you said that you didn't think Naito had a chance of winning it, because that's who I think will win it.
Ooh.
Because I think because I think Naito makes the most storyline sense to face Sanada, because I don't think Sanada is dropping the title now before Wrestle Kingdom. Dominion has passed. Typically, they like to do it between Dominion or Wrestle Kingdom. Dominion's gone now. I think he will hold it until Wrestle Kingdom. Sanada left Naito to go and win the world title. They've been telling the story of Naito sort of falling out of the main event and getting more and more frustrated that he's falling out of the main event. So I could see him winning the G1 to challenge Sanada at Wrestle Kingdom, with Naito's motivation being one last shot at winning this title, because he's getting on a bit now.
Yeah,
Kind of he's the leader of a faction who is, Yota failed to do it when he was aligned with the group. And I think that is the most interesting way you can go from a storyline perspective. Now, that's not to say that they will do it, because, like, as I said before, your Ospreys, your Okadas, and all of those guys, they're more, they're bigger names you can put in that spot to kind of take the title from Sanada. But I think, this is no disrespect to Sanada, because I really like Sanada, but I would rather see a storyline fueled Wrestle Kingdom Sanada match than I would just him versus Okada again, or him versus any of these guys that, they just feel like matches for the sake of matches. And I think for a Wrestle Kingdom match, you can do something more interesting than that. And I think if you put Sanada and Naito in and let them tell a proper story, I think it could be really, really interesting. So my pick is Tetsuya Naito.
fair enough. I mean, honestly, from a storyline perspective, that would make a lot of sense, right? Great point there, David. This hot take, and I'm not going to get into it, but I'm just not really a fan of many Naito matches. I think I can count on one hand the amount of matches of his which I've been a big fan of. And I've seen many over the years of his. So I kind of hope that's not the case. I also find Sanada a bit hit and miss, although he's been on a fantastic run lately of bangers, so who knows. But Coby, you just said you've got one more thing to add?
Yeah, so I mean, something that incredibly just popped into my mind with David saying he'd rather see a Sanada story match than a Sanada Okada match, just rematch for the sake of Okada. But this comes to mind based on what we've kind of perceived. And I mean, we saw kind of the finish from Forbidden Door with Bryan Danielson and Okada. Bryan Danielson tapped up Okada. So, I mean, or tapped out Okada. So there's an interesting way that could be a Wrestle Kingdom match for next year. Is that up in the air? That kind of takes out Okada's name. I agree with the statement that, yeah, Naito almost deserves that one last run, but I don't know if that's the direction they go. I don't want to necessarily say they need it, but they could have Okada defend that briefcase against Naito, and Naito wins it. And that's the story. That, like, there's multiple ways to get to a Naito Sanada match, but I do think there is that possibility of Okada versus Danielson at Wrestle Kingdom next year as well.
Yeah,
I did want to bring up.
That's a great shout, Coby. And now you're saying that would make a lot of sense as well. It's why I'm into New Japan again at the minute. I've been kind of out of it for the last 18 months or so. Well, maybe a bit longer, to be honest. It's since the pandemic hit, and then I wasn't really enjoying the booking. But recently they've drawn me back in because it feels unpredictable again, and that's fantastic. And that's what I want to see. I don't want to see these same matches over and over again with no direction. I want to see a direction, and they're beginning to have one again, which I love. But now let's move on to the next question, right? And this is about the direction of WWE's business, and more specifically, NXT. And this question is, should WWE have a developmental brand in each continent, or would that kill the independent scene? And this is a very, very good question, right? On one hand, this would be safer for wrestlers. It would be. We know, of course, the speaking out movement or all this stuff like that. A lot of independent promotions and specifically training schools have, I mean, especially here in the UK, have had a dark history. Now, that doesn't mean all by any means at all, but a lot did, right? We saw that coming out. And a lot of these, these training schools, at least from, my experience, is that it's not like they have, got insurance and stuff like this. It really is kind of dangerous, right? So it would be safer, right? Because WWE obviously do it a lot safer. They follow a lot more regulations and all of that stuff. However, it would certainly hurt the independent scene. It would. There's no denying it. It hurt the independent scene in the US when NXT started signing a lot of them during the Black and Gold brand. We saw NXT, the independent scene about 2016, 2017 was the best it's ever been. And then NXT just signed tons of them. They signed Keith Lee, they signed all of those names, Matt Riddle, and it just killed the independent scene in the US basically until after COVID. It really did hurt it for quite a few years. And admittedly, AEW played a role in that as well. But at the same time, in recent, months and the last year, really, WWE have gone in the direction of hiring athletes from other sports rather than independent stars, right? So it's entirely possible if they did have an NXT developmental brand in every continent that they just hire athletes from those sports. And they wouldn't really, take all the independent stars and would just have a few exceptions to the rule. And then maybe the independent scene would still survive. But David, I'll pass it to you first. What do you think? And do you think it would be a good idea for WWE developmental brand in every continent?
No, please, no. Just very quickly, I've started every single segment today with just quickly. Seems to be my thing. With regards to WWE following more regulations, that is true, but WWE developmental is not immune to issues. We went through the Build a Mott stuff years ago. No, they're not immune to this stuff. Granted, they are still safer than the independent, than kind of some independent. I don't want to give all independent promotions a bad name by any means.
I think it's fair to say that they're safer than all independent promotions because of the amount of money they have. Yeah,
they have. Yes, they definitely do have more money. Let's remember that nobody watched NXT UK, right? NXT UK got I genuinely think like there are about 5 viewers by the end of it. People tune back for Walter Dragunov and then disappeared again. I don't necessarily, this is my kind of hot take, and this is probably looking at it from a very cynical perspective. I don't think WWE starting NXT UK or starting any of these promotions are designed to scout the best talent for their American brand. I do genuinely think they do it so that they can put a conglomerate over that part of the world. Because when they launched NXT UK, they basically did it to mess with World of Sport. And by messing with World of Sport and by kind of hiring everybody, they then messed with Progress and with Rev Pro and with WCPW and Defiant, and all of those things kind of went by the wayside. Now, the way to do it probably would be to take the route that you said, Ben, and to hire more athletes. But I don't think that's their goal. I genuinely could, if they want to establish global domination in every market, this is what they've done before. Is hire all of the people in a massive spree. They did it with the American indies. They did it with the UK indies. They'll probably do it with WXW and all of those when NXT Europe launches. And it's a good business practice. From a WWE perspective, it's a great business practice to get all this talent because it gives you that dominance. But I don't necessarily think the putting, if we have an NXT India and any of those things, I don't necessarily think that it's going to be to find, maybe India is slightly different, but in places with thriving independent scenes, I reckon, it seems like these NXT kind of things are there so that they can hoover up all of that talent and they can make a brand there. Whether they'll learn from the failures of NXT UK from a business perspective, it remains to be seen. But I really don't want it because I don't think we need it. I think WWE, they can set up training possibly in different places, but I don't want to see them start an NXT Europe, a televised NXT Europe, and a televised NXT India, and a televised all these things, because I just think it's quite anti-competition, and it just kind of really hoovers it all up. Just me personally.
Fair enough. I think a lot of people agree with you there, David, and I think that's certainly going to be an Instagram reel, what you've just said. So we'll probably see that as well. But Coby, I'll send it to you next. What do you think?
I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is when talking about NXT UK, my heart hurts. But NXT UK still had working relationships with other independent companies. They were letting people like Walter work with OTT, and they were letting people appear for Progress like Bait and Dunn. ICW Scotland, they're doing the same as well. Of course, WXW is another one of the names that they had Walter had one of his last matches before coming to the States in WXW against Carnivore. Phenomenal match itself. But like, that's the thing. I agree with the statement that David said. As a wrestling fan, we probably don't want it. As a business practice, WWE, of course, would figure out the way to balance the books and make it make money. But I agree with the statement that it'd be nice to see. Not nice to see, but I think the smart decision for WWE is make those international performance centers, not international developmental brands. Because we don't want to see this, and this was almost the same problem with AEW. We don't want to see how many hours of developmental or the undercard of AEW Dark and Dark Elevation. We don't want to end up seeing an equivalent amount of hours of developmental TV than we get to like Raw and SmackDown. Raw and SmackDown's 5 hours, NXT's 2. They have NXT level up. We don't want to see a couple more shows that make it so it's like, well, there's 5 of the main roster, but there's also 5 developmental, and who's actually going to watch those anyway?
That's a great point. There's so much content now. We kind of not complain. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago about how much content there is now. It's impossible
There's too much
to watch it all. But we got Drizzy in the comments here saying Sonata versus Naito. Shut up and take my money. Shout out to Drizzy. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I might be one of the few just not a big fan of Naito. But anyway, let's move on now and let's talk about AEW, and that's specifically talk Mount Rushmore. Who are the Mount Rushmore of AEW so far? The 4 names that I'm going to give is firstly MJF. He's the first homegrown megastar that they've had, right? He's become, from nothing to something huge just in AEW, and that has been big for them. The second name I'm going to give is Jon Moxley. And he's been somebody who, of course, was there from pretty much the start. He was there at the first Double or Nothing, the big shock. And he's just been reliable for them. Every time they needed somebody to, rely on, he's been there. He's been reliable for them. And he's had a couple of great title reigns. And he's somebody who's AEW through and through. The next name I'm going to give is Kenny Omega. And you might be wondering why I say Kenny Omega out of anybody from the Elite and all of that. But here's the thing. I don't think AEW would exist, or at least be called All Elite Wrestling, if it wasn't for Kenny Omega. Because the Elite became super popular after Kenny Omega had that, that 6-star match with Kazuchika Okada that Dave Meltzer rated. That's what really brought so many eyes to him and kind of, caused a huge buzz in the wrestling world. It was that match. So if it wasn't for Kenny Omega, I don't think there would be an AEW, or at least them using that name. And then the final one, my 4th and final pick is very controversial, and that is CM Punk. Because, let's face it, he has done a lot of harm to AEW. He has done. Him walking out, he caused them, a lot of negative media and all of that, the entire brawl-out situation. But at the same time, him coming to AEW brought a lot of eyes to the product. Him alone is the reason for, AEW Collision existing. Even AEW Rampage, he was on the 2nd episode of that. Business-wise, CM Punk sold so many tickets for them, and he's brought so many eyes to AEW and made it a legit competition to WWE. But at the same time, yes, he has caused some harm too. But Coby, I'll send it to you next. Who do you think is the Mount Rushmore of AEW?
I mean, this is one of those questions we're going to have a lot of kind of repeated names being said. And I mean, like you said, MJF is that he calls himself the generational talent he is. It's going to be, if he does leave AEW, it is incredibly going to harm him. MJF hasn't had a bad pay-per-view match. Like he delivers on every stage you give him. He delivers in every way you expect him to. He is one of those names that is there. I mean, the other note, Jon Moxley's Mr. Reliable. Kenny Omega's the other name I said. He's an important name in multiple roles because he's probably one of those, like I think, I can't remember who said it, but the reason for Forbidden Door is kind of to get Omega and Okada in that position again. like to where they're in the same building, and we can always that looming kind of, oh, is that match ever going to happen once again? It's going to happen soon within the next few years as one final match and that type of way. But I think Kenny Omega like we said, he's an executive. He right, wrong, or indifferent. If you believe it was a success, he played a big role in Fight Forever. He's also one of those names that like does a lot of the media work in Japan. So he even from a business standpoint, Kenny Omega is really good. And I like as right, wrong, or indifferent if you like his style or not. The other name, like that's the thing. I don't think I could put Punk there because we talk about All Out, and I want to go quick because of time. We talk about All Out and how we had Punk back, we had Daniel Bryan, we had all these names debuting, and it felt like a paradigm shift in itself for AEW wrestling. And we look at it now, and it hasn't necessarily evolved the company or moved it. They're getting fairly similar television ratings. I don't like talk about. I guess that is an old metric as well, but the one person I kind of put is he was there at the beginning. He was the biggest star to sign to the company. You gotta go at Chris Jericho.
Fair enough.
He's the established legend working to build this company simply because he was the first champion as well. He helped make a lot of people. He's worked a number of different factions, the JS and the Inner Circle, and he's been that name to, does his rivalries go a little too long? You can kind of say that, yes. But at the end of the day, I think he does deserve his flowers for the work he's put in for the company.
That is a great choice as well. I mean, Jericho's somebody you could definitely argue, but what about you, David? Who are the 4 people who you would put on Mount Rushmore of AEW so far?
This is such a tough question to answer. I think 3 names, and they're the same 3 names that you guys have said. MJF, Jon Moxley, and Kenny Omega. I think they're given. I think you'd be very, very hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't argue those 3 guys, and 3 of the most important guys. Then I think it comes down to 4 people to fill out the final spot, which is between Bryan Danielson for his just unbelievable ring work over the last few years, Chris Jericho for exactly the same reasons that Coby said. You've got a little bit of you've got Cody Rhodes, which I don't think you can put in purely because of how much he's done for WWE, but he was so instrumental in the company's beginning. And for variety, the other option for me would be Britt Baker. But because I think I would be, I'd like to put a women's wrestler on there. Unfortunately, it's indicative of AEW's booking of the women's division that I don't feel I can go with Britt. No matter how she's been so instrumental in that company and such a workhorse, and she's worked so hard for them. Even when she was injured, she worked so hard for them. But AEW just haven't treated it with the respect that it needs. So I'm going to say for my 4th pick, between Danielson and Jericho, purely because he's been there longer and for the work that he's done, I'm going to agree with Coby, and I'm going to say Chris Jericho for the final spot, just because of his name value having such a massive rocket boost for them at the start of AEW's run. Has he had his issues? Yes. I feel it's gone on too long? Yes. But you certainly can't complain with the work that Jericho's done. He's worked so hard. He's reinvented himself about 4 times in the last few years. And I think for the work that he's done for the company, I'm going to say, MJF, Kenny Omega, Jon Moxley, Chris Jericho.
Well, wow. We got 2 people who are saying Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, MJF, and Chris Jericho. Well, I have swapped out Chris Jericho for CM Punk, but I mean, you guys are very much right as well. He was the big first signing for AEW as well. That is undoubtedly a good shout. And Drizzy agrees with you guys, but instead of Kenny Omega, he is putting Hangman Page in there. And I mean, that's a good shout too. Yeah, that's good too. I mean, I'm still going to argue Kenny because I don't think you can put the elite in, the elite in AEW if it wasn't for Kenny Omega's match with Okada a few years back. But still, it is a very, very tough question. We had some great answers there. But that brings us to the end of the episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're over on YouTube, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe down below. If you're over on Spotify, a cheeky 5 stars will do fantastically. Thank you so much to Coby, who's got his notes there, and David for joining me today. I hope you have a great holiday, David. And thank you to everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow an hour later, 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 1 p.m. Pacific for our Raw review. See you guys then. Enjoy your day.